Let me say good morning to everyone, and I am pleased to present the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022. The proposed budget for all funds total $5.1 billion, an increase of $227.96 million, or 4.7%. The enterprise fund accounts for $125 million, and with airport and $115 million, and then the convention and entertainment with 10. That accounts for a significant portion of that 227.96 million. However, when compared to the fiscal year 2021 adopted budget of 5.08 billion, you're looking at a net change of $28 million, or 0.06%. So the additional 228 million factors in the CARES funding into enterprise fund and in other areas. The proposed general fund budget of 2.58 billion reflects an increase in spending by 96.6 million, or 3.9% from fiscal year 21. The current budget of 2.48 billion. This increase is primarily attributable to the restoration of prior year's funding levels from COVID-19 eligible redeployment costs that were funded out of the Corona Relief Fund. This included costs diverted to mitigate and respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency, such as city employees, temperature screening, and costs pertaining to the COVID-19 testing site. Redeployment costs make up $32 million of that amount, and other costs include $18 million for debt service payment, $11.4 million for the 611 Walker rent deferral, $11 million for police classified costs, $10 million for one-time transfer to the maintenance renewal and replacement fund. When compared to fiscal year 21 adopted budget of 2.51 billion, you're looking at a net change of $68 million, or 2.7%. Like most states and local governments across the nation, the City of Houston faces record revenue loss due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 2021, and portion of fiscal year 2022 alone, we are estimating $178 million in cumulative revenue losses. Sales tax is one of our hardest hit sources, with an expected $113 million cumulative loss for those fiscal years. Additionally, we are projecting $65 million in revenue losses from other sources, such as charges for services, parking revenues, mixed beverage tax, and others. Thankfully, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, signed into law by President Joe Biden on March 11, 2021, will provide the city with much needed relief, as well as other cities across the country. And based on updated information from the U.S. Treasury received only yesterday, the City of Houston is now expected to receive $607.8 million in two tranches, the first half in 2021 and the second half in 2022. I know previously it was reported that that number was 615. That number is now officially $607.8 million. The city would have until December 31st, 2024 to use the funds. Unlike the CARES funding, ARPA recognizes the economic impact due to the COVID-19 pandemic and provides flexibility to address the reduction in revenues due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Without this flexibility, the city would be facing major cuts across all services. The fiscal year 2022 proposed budget is based on the existing property tax revenue cap. Depending on the taxable valuation, we may have to adjust our tax rate to comply with the property tax revenue cap. A higher taxable value may result this year in tax rate reduction. We are assuming zero growth in population plus CPI in this current budget. In fiscal year 2022 alone, the full impact of the revenue cap will result in a loss of $265 million, which means dollars but for the cap we would be able to utilize. Since hitting the cap in fiscal year 2015, the full cumulative impact of the revenue cap on our city is $1.18 billion since 2015. And again, but for the revenue cap, the city would have been able to utilize over $1 billion for city services and operations. The loss of revenue due to COVID-19 alone, with our existing property tax revenue cap, continue to create a $201 million budget shortfall in the general fund, the city's largest deficit in recent history, 201. For the sixth consecutive year, however, my annual proposal closes this gap. And admittedly, but for the dollars coming from ARPA, due to the administration of President Biden, this gap would have been difficult to close, but for major cuts. To address the gap, this budget includes $188.5 million in ARPA utilization, $178 million for the provision of government services relative to revenue reduction due to COVID-19 public health emergency, and $10.5 million allocation to the Houston Zoo to respond to the negative economic impact due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. When you combine the $178 million for the provision of government services, along with the $10.5 million for the zoo allocation, that brings you to the $188.5 million that we are using in ARPA dollars. $7.2 million will be coming from the department's reductions, and $5.2 million for the Houston Public Works debt prepayment from the Building Inspection Fund. Additionally, this budget does not draw down from the fund balance, and this budget does not include any one-time land sales or deferrals. The fiscal year 2022 ending fund balance will be 9.64%, which equates to $208.7 million of operating expenditures less debt service and pay-as-you-go, well above the minimum of 7.5% established in the city's financial policies. $46.3 million, this is $46.3 million above the 7.5% of expenditures less debt service and pay-as-you-go. We will fully replenish the Budget Stabilization Fund, placing the city in a better position heading into hurricane season. What that means is that we are restoring the $20 million in the Budget Stabilization Fund. Although the budget presented is balanced, fully replenishes the Budget Stabilization Fund, and provides a healthy fund balance reserve, our work is not done. I have already outlined my plan to implement a significant number of recommendations submitted by the Mayor's Task Force on Policing Reform, which includes accountability, transparency, and crisis intervention strategies. Those dollars can be directly budgeted from the ARPA funding dedicated account that we are setting up. In addition, we will address the firefighters' pay raise, continue to improve our neighborhoods through complete communities, address issues of homelessness and encampments, and increase the response to illegal dumping. With regards to the firefighters' pay raise, because we received the Treasury advisory on yesterday, there will be another press conference scheduled for next week, specifically dealing with the firefighters' pay raise. And this budget will be amended or redlined to include a pay raise in this budget for our firefighters. At the same time, we must remember that the ARPA funds will be needed to address the revenue losses in fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 2024 caused by COVID-19. So as we move forward, we must be mindful of the fact that these are dollars that have to be utilized for our budgetary needs and other priorities over the next couple of years. Having said that, this is the budget that I am submitting to council for their consideration and for their approval. And for the sixth consecutive year, it is a balanced budget based on the city's priorities as we move forward in this city. And that, therefore, you see the cover on the budget with the arrow, the city continues to move forward.